Star Wars. It's one of the most talked about franchises in history. Many people analyze these films, from the original movies, the prequels, and even the new ones. I think Star Wars makes such an impact for each movie, from a technical standpoint to storytelling, whether it's done masterfully or disastrous.
A day that takes us through the darkness.
From the original trilogy, it creates so many iconic characters, scenes, and even props. One of my favorite icons from Star Wars, other than the story or the characters and the effects, is the lightsaber. As a kid, I've always wanted a lightsaber. Not only because it looked colorfully appealing, I wanted to react to one of my favorite fight scenes in the movies. The lightsaber fights in the original trilogy would really stick out to me, filled with driving emotion and memorable moments. I also originally liked the lightsaber fights in the prequels because, well, they just look really cool to me. And as time passes on as an adult, I still think back to those fights from the original movies. At a mature age, wanting to learn about filmmaking and screenwriting, these fights in the structure of the original trilogy are usually saved for the end of the movie, as a build-up or the finale to structure, and mostly the heart of the films. The prequel fights has gotten less awesome from what I remember. It has the choreography and the spectacle, but it's missing one of the most important things, and that is the emotion. Now, this isn't anything new to say, but I really don't like the prequels. The Phantom Menace was completely dull, Attack of the Clones is the worst movie out of the saga, and Revenge of the Sith is definitely a step in the right direction, but with extremely poor execution. However, I'm not going to talk about these movies since they were studied to death. I actually want to talk about the last lightsaber fight scene in Revenge of the Sith. Now, remember when I said the lightsaber fights were usually saved for the end of the movie? The Phantom Menace would follow that formula, but then Attack of the Clones would have about 3 lightsaber battles, and then in Revenge of the Sith there is a total of 5 lightsaber fights, and most of it feels completely useless. Like the Obi-Wan and General Grievous fight, this scene doesn't really matter into the story, it just feels like a really goofy fight scene that's just shown for spectacle. Same thing with Yoda and the Emperor, and the Emperor versus Mace Windu. The Anakin vs. Obi-Wan fight is supposed to be the movie's emotional climax and the biggest build-up from the prequel trilogy, but it misses one of the most important things into making an entertaining fight scene. Starting with tensionless. Tension is what builds risk and danger surrounding our characters. Of course, this isn't a new thing, but it's an important one. You want to feel scared for the character's life going through the trial. Like The Empire Strikes Back, it sets up the tension for the characters perfectly. The heroes were lucky enough in the previous film to destroy a super weapon, but the Empire doesn't even mess around and they hunt down the rebellion without hesitation. This helps us care for the characters after we witness their likability. Our heart races when the main characters would fly through the asteroid fields where they could easily crash into an asteroid and die, but they can't turn back because the Empire is literally chasing them down. In Revenge of the Sith, there is hardly any of these moments. I mean, there's mostly 2 moments that showed some sort of danger. Anakin would trap Obi-Wan without his lightsaber strangling him, and then there's another scene where Obi-Wan and Anakin are trying to balance on a pipe without falling. But then, oh, don't worry, there's a nice little platform for them to land without damaging themselves whatsoever.
Superhero landing! Yeah, that's really hard on your knees.
The rest of the fight has Anakin and Obi-Wan swinging lightsabers at each other, hardly acknowledging any danger. Like, they're fighting on a lava planet. Shouldn't this concern them in the slightest bit? Remember that scene in Empire when Luke was cornered by Vader and he was worried about falling? What about that scene at the end of The Force Awakens when Kylo Ren was about to push Rey down into the deep trenches tearing up the whole planet? Hell, even Darth Maul force pushes Obi-Wan, almost falling to his death. All those scenes have something in common. We see our heroes reacting to the danger. This helps with the audiences connect with our main characters that they know that they're not gonna make it. Obi-Wan and Anakin, they just don't look like they're in danger or at risk. I know fans would point out that these Jedis are supposed to be at their prime, but in my opinion, that just makes it feel so boring to me. If they can successfully fight without looking concerned around the danger, then it wouldn't get the audiences connected to those stakes, other than, well, not getting their hand chopped off. This also doesn't help, which leads to my next problem, the direction for the actors. In the script, this scene could have been written as Obi-Wan and Anakin fights to death in a volcano planet causing massive destruction, putting our heroes at risk. Like, okay, that sounds good on paper, but can we get our actors to look remotely worried? It looks like if Hayden Christensen and Ian McGregor were trying to memorize their choreography without getting into the feel of the scenes. All that can be blamed by the director's weak attempt of his direction for the actors. One of the most important things about acting is not only just getting into character, but having a sense of an idea what the character is experiencing or feeling. No matter how cheesy Luke's scream was, we can tell he was shocked from the tone of his voice and facial expression. All we get is poor delivery and bad dialogue in this.
I should have known the Jedi were plotting to take over.
Anakin, Chancellor Palpatine is evil!
From my point of view, the Jedi are evil.
Fighting with lightsabers honestly isn't enough to get me convinced with the acting. Of course, the original lightsaber fights weren't going too crazy with the environment because it was more about the character drama than just flashy, dumb action.
I've been waiting for you, Obi-Wan. We meet again at last. The circle is now complete. When I left you, I was but the learner. Now I am the master.
Only a master of evil, Darth.
I know what I'm about to suggest isn't going to fix the whole scene, but this could have at least helped make it more compelling. Actors versus green screen. I think while watching the prequels, it's obvious George Lucas was fascinated with the CGI effects of the time. He thinks relying on special effects would help make a movie blow everyone away from the spectacle instead of just planning on making a solid script. This is an equivalent comparison to the actors interacting with the environment. One of the things that could make a movie feel believable is putting our sets in real locations or grand set productions to interact with. I love watching behind-the-scenes documentaries about making movies when you see the actors having fun on set and they feel like they're part of a bigger world. Having the cast being filmed behind a green screen only gives the actors such limited range along with mixed expressions. While these problems aren't major, most of these problems just kind of bother me in this fight scene, but probably the worst element about this movie that doesn't make it a good fight scene is lack of substance. Now, I'm going to compare this fight to my favorite lightsaber fight scene from the whole saga, Return of the Jedi. Luke Skywalker's goal in his storyline is to convince his father to return to the light side, knowing that there's still good in him. We witness the Emperor tempting Luke, giving in to his anger to fall into the dark side, but Luke fights back, doing the opposite and refusing to fight Vader, until Vader knows Luke's weaknesses about his sister Leia, and therefore giving him an idea to get her to the dark side. This makes Luke snap, giving in to the anger, almost killing his own father. While the Emperor tempts him again to kill his father, Luke refuses his offer and becomes a true Jedi Knight. This scene nicely completes Luke's story arc, and it deals with the themes of temptation, anger, and redemption. In Revenge of the Sith, I'll give it credit, there's actually a solid setup to his fight. I mean, if you could get past through the terrible acting and performances. Obi-Wan disappointingly knows that Anakin has descended to the dark side. This creates conflict and drama, and they turn on their lightsabers and they fight. And they fight, and they fight, and they're fighting in a different location, fighting in another location, and then they're fighting while spewing foul dialogue.
The Jedi are evil!
And then Obi-Wan wins. So, okay, solid beginning, but nothing happens in between the fight. What makes the fight scene in Return of the Jedi work so well is because our characters are progressing through the scene, making some sacrifices and change. We learn something new about them. What makes this problem even worse is that this fight scene goes on for too long. Literally 9 minutes of nothing, without any tension or stakes whatsoever. You're just watching 9 minutes of a boring fight. There's even another Star Wars movie that has a similar structure with Revenge of the Sith with the fight scene, and that's in one of the recent movies, in The Last Jedi. There's a beginning in the fight which kind of leads to a pointless lightsaber action scene, and then it has a little wrap-up ending. What makes this scene more well-made is because of a couple of reasons. The acting isn't awful.
Strike me down in anger and I'll always be with you. Just like your father.
There's some good dialogue, the effects are well done, along with great cinematography, and most importantly, the characters, especially Luke, progresses into the story, completing his story arc. He starts out as a bum, no longer believing in the Jedi Order, regretting his mistakes in the past until he needed some motivations to help him move on to the future and become a hero again. If you compare that scene to the fight scene in Revenge of the Sith, Obi-Wan doesn't really learn anything. He just knows that Anakin has turned to the dark side, which was already established in the beginning of the fight. He doesn't even question himself if he did anything wrong to motivate Anakin resisting his teachings or inspire him to become too reckless. This could have nicely tied in with The Empire Strikes Back when Obi-Wan says,
Was I any different when you taught me?
Of course, that's hard enough when Obi-Wan hardly had any character development in the previous prequel films, which this can hurt a good fight scene. I think it's already redundant to say that the prequels hardly have anything to offer. The only things I can think about that's worth appreciating about those films is the score by John Williams, the sound design, and the two actors who are putting more effort into their performances than the rest of the cast. I can't really say the same for the story or the characters or the action scenes, especially when the whole trilogy is leading up to this very moment. It's disappointing to see how poorly executed this scene is. I can understand why fans enjoy this fight, because mostly the spectacle, the cool choreography, and John Williams' epic score. But it's just not enough to get me to enjoy the rest of the scene. If you can overlook my problems with this scene, then you'll probably like it just fine. But I look for mostly these important things to enjoy a scene or even a movie. A good plot, memorable characters, fantastic cinematography, gripping action scenes, special effects that would hold up to this day, and most importantly, the emotion. Thank you for watching.